Should Florida State fans be worried about recruiting right now? That is the question that so many of you are asking your friends, you're asking me, you're asking strangers on the internet. So let's dive in. With this fan base, I feel like there's a tendency sometimes to create worry where no real worry should exist. And that worry can sometimes be compounded when things are perceived to be going better in other places. Obviously, a lot of you see what's going on in Gainesville right now as an example. But let's talk about FSU recruiting. This week, Jason Zandamela, a four-star offensive line prospect and target, committed to USC. Florida State also lost Dylan Stevenson to Stanford just a week ago. He's a defensive end. Zandamela, again, an interior offensive lineman. Let's get right down to it. There's a lot of factors that go into recruiting. There's some factors that go into why Florida State missed on these two prospects, but I'm not ready to hit the panic button just yet. And here's why. Losing Stevenson has been regarded as an academic situation. And when you lose a kid to Stanford for academics, you kind of understand that, right? You're not going to win a lot of battles against Stanford in a head-to-head battle if the number one priority is academics. I do believe that Florida State will still have a chance to stay in that recruitment. I also don't know that they view Stevenson as a can't miss prospect. Now, that's not to say we dropped him. That's not to say that he wasn't a take or anything like that. We're not getting crazy with spin here today. But I do believe they'll stay in the recruitment. And if at the end of the day, academics are what's most important to Stevenson, then he probably will end up at Stanford. But Zandamela is where I want to focus most of tonight's energy on, as that commitment happened yesterday. Offensive line is a relatively deep position for the Noles right now. You think about what they've done, not only in the transfer portal, but also in recruiting. Done a good job bringing in guys like Early, Simmons, Armella, and others to this class. And I think they like the foundation of where this offensive line is. As a deep position, you want to continue to stack talent there, but you have to do it in a smart way. As we mentioned, Zandamela committed to USC. And let's just be frank with things. You are not going to win a lot of NIL battles against USC. It just kind of is what it is. And you kind of have to understand that if USC goes all in on a recruitment, they're probably going to win that more times than they won't. Florida State had a long-standing relationship with Zandamela, and USC only got in on him a couple of months ago. And for the kid to choose to go across country and essentially throw away or neglect the relationship that he had with the Florida State staff probably points to a pretty significant change in what he was looking for. And I think USC offered that in the form of NIL opportunities. I don't blame him at all. If that's his choice and that's kind of where he wants to go, that's completely fine with me. But Florida State's in a unique position right now. I think there are certain times where they can be very, very aggressive with NIL, but I think they try to choose and pick their battles wisely. And I don't know that going head to head on an all in battle against USC for an interior offensive lineman is what Florida State would consider being smart about how they're using their NIL funds. I think that because we have somewhat limited resources, and I say that with maybe some air quotes around it, I think Florida State has a top 10-ish NIL package in the country. I think when limited resources compared to a USC are involved, you have to be strategic about where you want to spend and what you think the best way to spend NIL resources is. I've been told by a couple of people that Florida State does not see the value in ponying up insane amounts of cash for a position that they think they can develop and or get out of the transfer portal. Long story short, I think it makes a lot of sense to pony up a bag for a five-star wide receiver, a five-star cornerback, or a QB that's rated very highly and does well at the Elite 11. But I don't think that it makes a ton of sense for Florida State to pony up an insane amount of cash for an interior offensive lineman. The track record also says that Florida State can be pretty successful at bringing in offensive and defensive linemen through the transfer portal. Obviously, you cannot continue to go back to the portal year after year after year and expect to make your living there. But I do think that there are certain positions you can kind of always pull from. And the transfer portal is usually full of interior offensive linemen. I think that Florida State will be fine at that position. Is the Zandamela commitment to USC a miss? Absolutely it is. But is it a miss that Florida State was okay with? Well, you're never okay missing, but is it a miss that they probably let go and focus their efforts and resources in other places? I would tend to believe so. Well, there's a lot of big fish left, and we'll talk about those in just a moment. But I do want to give some love to our friends over at Garnet and Gold. Listen, some of these jerseys have already sold out in certain sizes, what I'm being told. I know that people have been online and not been able to get theirs. So you need to get to garnetandgold.com right now. I don't care if you live in Tallahassee or not. Buy them online because they might not be there when you get to the store tomorrow. Garnetandgold.com has the best FSU apparel, licensed merchandise, whatever you're looking for. And they're one of the only places you can get the official jersey right now. They got them in white. They got them in garnet. They also have the authentic limited edition. That one's a little bit more, but you can get these jerseys for right at $100. You can use our code NOSLAW to save 15%. That's NOSLAW. You won't get that discount by going in stores. You got to use it online. But you can do free shipping. If you're ordering this, it qualifies for free shipping. If you're picking up locally in Tallahassee, it does as well. Get your jerseys today. Get any of your other FSU merchandise from only one place, garnetandgold.com, the absolute best FSU retailer that exists. Okay, a lot of big fish left at skill positions that I think Florida State does have to, and they likely will close on. I'm not willing to hit the panic button because you lost an interior offensive lineman. I'm not willing to hit the panic button because you lost a 4-star defensive end to academics at Stanford. I think that we'll get closer to hitting the panic button if some of the big fish that we're going to talk about in just a moment decide to go elsewhere. At the end of the day, our staff does have to close better. And if you end up missing on all of your targets for this one off or that one off or this situation or that situation, well, you're left with a pretty bad class. And so we can make excuses. We can justify a Stevenson situation. We can justify Zandamela and say that, hey, we didn't want to go balls to the wall on the NIL there. But there are other prospects and there are other targets that we will not be able to make excuses for. Guys like Charles Lester, guys like JoJo Trader, where you're going head-to-head with Miami for his commitment. Guys like Mekhi Danzy, Jamari Howard, who you're going head-to-head with Florida and Miami for. Kylan Fox, tight end. James Madison, Jalewis Solomon, Jonathan Daniels, an offensive tackle, where I do believe Florida State is willing to pony up and pay the big bucks to get him in. Those are guys you have to hit on. Those are guys you have to get their commitments. A guy like Charles Lester, who had said that he was going to take his commitment all the way until December, well, he just moved up his date to July 29th. I'd love him to commit even sooner than that, but I do believe that Charles Lester could get the ball rolling and could be the kind of commit that brings an avalanche or a wave of defensive commits to this roster. I do think that Lester is that kind of can't-miss prospect, and I think Florida State's in a really good position for him. I've shared some inside thoughts, and I've shared my prediction on what I think happens with Lester over in our Discord. That is free to join. There are some paid channels there, so you can check those out if you want, but go check our Discord out down in the link below in the description. I've shared some insight and some info on Lester. If you just tag me at TJ Pittenger, I'll answer your questions if you're new over there and need any help. But a guy like Lester is a guy that I feel good about right now. Can the Noles pull him in just around 40 days from now at the end of July? Kylan Fox is a tight end that I think the Noles feel extremely good about. He and both James Madison will be committing on July 4th. I think the Noles are a good fit there. Now, the Noles have 4 wide receivers, so there's some question around whether or not Madison is a take or not. I think that if he's a take, he does end up picking FSU. If not, and Florida State kind of just holds to the wide receivers they have now, obviously he may go elsewhere. Obviously, there have been rumors and whispers around TJ Abrams, LaWayne McCoy, potentially not staying in this class. If both those guys are still in by July 4th, we'll see what Madison does or doesn't do. If one or both those guys are no longer in the class, I think you may see Madison become a Seminole. Kylan Fox, again, tight end. I think the Noles are in a great spot there. UCF, maybe the biggest competition there. And I think the Noles could hold off UCF maybe with both hands tied behind their back. So I feel good about a lot of these guys. Some that are probably a bigger stretch. I think Jamari Howard is one that they really need to work on. I need to get that official visit set up. Rumored to be at UF this weekend during Friday Night Lights. They've got a lot of momentum on the trail. I'd love for Florida State to be able to get him in this weekend. Don't know if they're trying to save that official visit. It hasn't been officially set up yet, but he has said he would take one. It's a kid that I think takes it all the way to December. So we'll see what happens with that one. But I like where Florida State sits with a lot of skill players, a lot of skill positions that are out there. I'm not losing my mind right now over the interior offensive lineman. I'm also not losing my mind over the defensive end that did not commit to the Noles either. I think Florida State does need to pick it up in certain places. I think that linebacker, defensive line, defensive end could all be improved. I really like what Florida State's doing recruiting otherwise. And when you look at where Florida State was just 2 years ago, nitpicking on 2 or 3 positions and being pretty happy with where the other 10 or 11 are on the roster is probably a good sign. The expectations are rising, and they're rising in the recruiting ranks as well. So we'll see if Florida State can improve at some of those positions. If Florida State is not able to close on some of the names that we talked about, I think at that point you would start to worry. Florida State needs to be up near a top 10 class this year. I think their absolute highest they could likely get to is around the 7 mark, and they need to finish no lower than 12. In fact, I think Florida State fans will certainly be a little disappointed if they're not able to get into that top 10. The Noles won 10 games last year, and I think they're going to win more than that this year. And if you can't capitalize with a top 10 class after winning 10 games in back-to-back seasons, while your rivals are going to go under 500 for the 3rd year in a row and out-recruit you, I think that does ring some alarm bells. Now, I do trust the staff. I trust their evaluations. And I think that overall Mike Norvell and company do really well. But you've got to be able to close, and the staff has done a good job of that. They need to get to where they're doing an elite job of that. The product they're going to put on the field this year is going to be elite. It's going to be one of the best in college football. Does it make the playoff or not? I'm not sure. But I do know that they finish in the top 10 in the country, both offensively and overall. So if they can't put it together on the recruiting trail to back that up, I'll have some questions, and we'll talk about that at a later date. But it's not time to hit the panic button just yet. Let's maybe take just a bit of a chill pill, maybe grab you a Gramco gummy or two, do some retail therapy shopping at Garnet Gold, and let's relax. Speaking of recruiting, Florida State's QB recruit, Luke Kromenhoek, went out to the West Coast and absolutely tore it up, while Florida State's biggest rivals QB absolutely struggled there on the West Coast. You can learn more about that and get our take on everything that went on at the Elite 11 by clicking right here.